Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. And just before Christmas, Liz Truss, the Christmas lettuce, came back to haunt us with some critical words about the Labour budget. Now, fair enough as a Conservative, of course, but of all the ways she might reasonably have criticised the budget, with a right-wing perspective, the specific way she did so made no sense. Much like her own attempt at a budget in 2022. However, she didn't simply make a nonsensical attack on the budget, she also brought up the Laffer Curve. So what is the Laffer Curve and why is it widely considered to be as hopelessly useless as Liz Truss herself? But first, for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So, as mothers around the world teach us, if you can't say anything nice, then don't say anything at all. So over Christmas Day and Boxing Day, I basically avoid saying anything political in line with the advice. But it's the 27th now, so back into the fray. That's my 2 days off, done for another year, back to work. And just before Christmas, Liz Truss had been piping up. Now, in a sense, you go, well, she's a Conservative. Of course she's going to complain about a Labour budget. Yeah, absolutely. But being Liz Truss, you might have supposed she'd want to avoid talking about budgets. I mean, she was a senior member of the government for many years before becoming Prime Minister. In theory, you would think there'd be lots of chapters in her political career. She is the minister who scrapped a load of water monitoring points, allowing water companies to illegally pollute rivers and coastal areas. She's also the minister who, alongside Boris Johnson, arranged our terrible post-Brexit trade deals that had an Australian news presenter literally laughing as he presented the news to the Australian public. She managed to allow the Russian foreign minister to make her look ridiculous during the tense period around the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, when putting on a show of strength would have been preferable. But none of that matters, because what the public know about Liz Truss is that she introduced an attempt at economic insanity. So all of this stuff about using dogs to scare off drones, all of that, the public don't know about that. What they know is that she triggered consequences so severe that her own party were compelled to sack her, making her the shortest serving Prime Minister in British history by some margin, and the previous title holder died in office, and not really their fault. In other words, she's probably not someone who is going to persuade the general public that anyone else's budget is going to be a problem. But Truss's specific statements are worth looking at in a bit more detail, because she said two things that demonstrate just how clueless she is. The first was to describe the budget as containing unfunded tax rises. She actually said that. Unfunded tax rises. How does that make sense? You can't have unfunded tax rises. You can have unfunded tax cuts, like with her mini budget, because that's what she's thought to herself, isn't it? She thought, oh, they said my tax cuts were unfunded. Well, I'll say her tax rises are unfunded. Don't work that way, you mad bat. And while we're on the subject, like Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt's budget of earlier this year, as we later found out, that was also contained unfunded tax cuts. They just hid it at the time. But Truss's mini budget was famous for containing unfunded tax cuts because she cut tax, which means she cut the Treasury's revenue, without explaining how she was going to cut spending to balance the figures, because she just assumed that rich people would just randomly pay extra tax to make it all add up. Oh, it'll stimulate growth, you see. What, straight away? All right. But you can't have unfunded tax rises because taxes are the funds. It's literally adding to the pot. You can have an unfunded budget that contains tax rises. Like, if Rachel Reeves had have put up taxes, but then she'd have put up spending by even more, then okay. But the independent analysis says, no, it all adds up. And it doesn't matter what the Telegraph's saying at the moment. If in the future, then it doesn't, then she can adjust it in a future budget. So that'll be fine. But it is typical of the genuine ignorance that Liz Truss has about economics, that she thinks tax rises can be unfunded. With, some politicians, when they launch spurious attacks, they're just playing deliberate political games. They at least make sure that what they're saying can sort of make sense. Truss really is this thick. But it brings me on to a more worrying statement she made. because there was a second part to her tweet. Her comment on unfunded tax rises was just ridiculous, and as a result drew a lot of ridicule. Not much attention paid to the second bit. She then said that Britain needs to rediscover the Laffer Curve. So what is the Laffer Curve? And why does it need rediscovering from her point of view? Why did we ever drop it in the first place? And why should we be worried that this insane former Prime Minister is keen on it? Well, the Laffer Curve was composed by an economist decades ago who's called Laffer. That's why it's called the Laffer Curve, really. It was not because, it makes you laugh out loud, right? It was designed to show that there's a sort of sweet spot for tax rates. Now, the basic ideas are, there's a few first principles which seem perfectly valid. If you have a tax rate of 0, you will raise no taxes. Well, yeah, sure, obvious. If you have a tax rate of 100%, you will also raise no taxes. Well, this is also true. There would be absolutely no reason for anyone to go out wanting to make money as either a business owner, an investor, or a worker if 100% of all the money you made was going to be taxed away. So the author, Arthur Laffer, he reasoned there must be some point between 0 and 100% where the tax rate maximises tax revenues, because you start from 0, you end up at 0. So there must be a point at an apex where that is the tax rate that maximises it. Anything below it, you can afford higher taxes. Anything over that, you're going to strangle investment and you'll end up with fewer taxes. And it's yeah, okay, yes. Up to a point, raising the rate of tax will bring in more taxes. And there does come a point where if you raise it too high, you lose those investments, which means although the rate of tax will be higher, the amount of tax you collect will be lower. All makes sense. However, where it goes wrong is the idea that you can just produce a curve. You throw in a few variables, and it is only a few variables, and you produce a curve that allows you to go, oh, there's the apex. That is the tax rate we should have. The problem is this is impossible. When you build a mathematical model for something, you have to make reasonable assumptions, and you generally discount factors which will not have an appreciable impact in the real world in order to avoid over-complexity. But Laffer discounted factors which do have a material effect. For example, the concept is so childishly simplistic that it assumes there's just a tax rate. So it completely breaks down when you go, hang on a minute, we can have tax bands and different rates, because that changes behaviours as well. No wonder Kemi Badenoch is so keen on a single flat tax rate if she is also thinking about applying the Laffer Curve. Another main criticism that this work has attracted from expert economists is that his assumptions all work on the basis that everyone having any input into the economy, so almost everyone basically, knows how the economy works in details and will make economic and financial decisions based on that. But this is, of course, bollocks. Everyone from a low-income worker up to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Governor of the Bank of England, CEOs of major corporations and banks will make miscalculations. Liz Truss, for example, made a big one. As a result, the model collapses when you try to use it, and people have tried to use it. It was part of the basis for the trickle-down economic model put forward by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. Even most conservatives accept that trickle-down theory doesn't work these days, at least publicly. But not Truss. This is why she is promoting the Laffer Curve, because she thinks that it can actually help you work out this optimal tax rate, but always puts forwards a much lower rate than is really the case. And the reason for that is there's always a load of businesses and very wealthy people who work out ways of dodging their taxes, which they do all the time. And then all of a sudden, the Treasury will come up short if you use this figure on the curve, because people are not going to behave in the way that this childish model assumes. But why should we be worried? Liz Truss is long gone, isn't she? She's not even an MP. And if she ever re-entered Parliament, the Tories would surely not dare promote her to any position where she'd have a say on economic policy, because the public are not going to forget what she did 2 years ago. The reason we should be worried is because Jeremy Hunt talked earnestly about the Laffer Curve whilst Chancellor. And he's considered one of the more sane Tory MPs these days. The fact that he would so openly discuss the Laffer Curve as if it were a viable and respected economic tool suggests that even though most Conservatives will not publicly admit to believing in trickle-down economics, they will use more obscure ways of arguing for the same thing. And as I said, Badenoch was recently talking about the appeal of a flat tax rate. This obviously benefits the rich and makes the poor pay higher taxes, as I discussed in a separate video, but it also makes applying the Laffer Curve easier. It means that the Conservatives, when they return to power, which they will sooner rather than later without electoral reform, are going to build their economic plans on an embarrassingly simplistic economic idea. Just as they introduced austerity last time on the basis of, remember, an Excel error. They based it on some calculation someone did in Excel and they made a mistake. Next time they're going to base it on an error from the 1970s, which has long since been debunked. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'll see you later.